3, 2, 1, blast off. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the MSP Chat Podcast, your weekly visit with two talking heads talking with you about the services, strategies, and success tips you need to make it big in managed services. My name is Rich Freeman. I'm the Chief Analyst at Channel Master, the organization responsible for this show. I am joined side by side in person for a lovely change by your other co-host, our CEO and Chief Strategist at Channel Master. His name is Erick Simpson. Erick, how you doing?
Doing pretty good, Rich. All things considered, here we are on the road at yet another event where we get to do the MSP Chat Podcast from the event together, which I always look forward to.
So stick with me on this because this is going to get a little bit confusing, folks. So we are at the TD SYNNEX Inspire 2025 event in Greenville, South Carolina. Actually, in real time, we just wrapped up two separate interviews with TD SYNNEX executives. We recorded them, and we're recording this on the day when these shows normally go out. So we're not going to have time to get those into this episode of the show. The next episode of the show is going to feature those TD SYNNEX interviews. Meanwhile, an interview that I did last week with Michael George, the CEO of Syncro, is going to be on this show coming up in the middle part of this episode. And we are going to be talking, I'll be talking with Michael George about Syncro's thinking around Microsoft and Microsoft's role in managed services and how Syncro is building around that. So it all comes together, one episode or another, and this is why it pays to be a regular listener.
Absolutely. Sometimes it confuses even what interviews and what episodes and what segments we're doing. But I'm glad you cleared that up for me, Rich, because I was texting with you last night trying to figure it out. And thanks for getting my mind wrapped straight around it.
It only took us 12 hours, and we've got it nailed down, folks. So in the last episode of the show, we spoke about Syncro's strategy and how it is built entirely around Microsoft. And at one point during that conversation, I sort of briefly mentioned that there was this bombshell announcement from Microsoft last week about how Enforcer and Nerdio were going to be sort of their go-to partners for multi-tenant use of the Intune management system. Since then, in the days since then, I've had an opportunity to interview executives at both Enforcer and at Nerdio and get a little deeper, understand better what that is about. And as I've come to understand it, Erick, I actually think it's kind of an interesting development for anyone in our audience here right now. Any MSP who is selling to SMBs, who is interested in the degree of Microsoft's seriousness about the SMB market and the managed service channel, because that Enforcer Nerdio announcement is a direct reflection of increasing interest in both SMB and MSP within Microsoft. So what I have learned is that this initiative came out of the Intune group. So the folks within Intune looking for the next big growth opportunity. And it's not even just Intune, it's really the Microsoft Cloud organization. They're well aware of the fact that there are a lot of Microsoft 365 subscribers out there who have features, programs, functions that they're paying for but not using. It's part of the subscription, but they're not taking advantage of it. And, from a stickiness perspective, that's never a good thing. You want people to get as much value as they possibly can from the subscription. Meanwhile, it's precisely because there are all these other things that you can do with Microsoft 365 that the end users out there don't necessarily know about. There is an opportunity to sell more Microsoft 365 into the market to maybe upgrade people to the business premium level, or from business premium to E3, E3 to E5. So they're seeing a big growth opportunity around Microsoft 365, specifically within SMB. They know that they can't scale inside Microsoft to drive that. They need MSPs to help them pursue that opportunity. And they also know MSPs will not do that unless they have a multi-tenant management experience with Intune. And so then Microsoft went out and they looked at the various vendors out there who could help them with that. At least as an initial wave, they selected Enforcer and Nerdio. And so that the initiative came out of the Intune group. I am told, though, that there are names were not specified, but there are executives at a very, very senior level inside of Microsoft who are directly aware of this initiative, directly interested in it. You're going to see Microsoft increasingly in the weeks and months ahead pushing MSPs. It'll be interesting to see how many folks in our audience are on the receiving end of this. But Microsoft is going to be really heavily promoting the idea of, using Enforcer products or Nerdio's products to go multi-tenant with Intune and to drive more Microsoft Cloud business in these areas. So I should also say that both Enforcer and Nerdio are plugged into the product groups at Microsoft, and they were both close before, but they're plugged in a different way. They're getting their MSP partners plugged in. I was told independently by both vendors that Microsoft is really looking for input from MSPs, building the Intune product and other pieces of Microsoft 365 around that. So if you've ever felt as an MSP that they're happy to sort of take your money or take your, but they don't really care about us, they don't really pay attention to us, this is an initial indication that might be changing, and it might be changing for reasons that begin with their opportunity to make more money. But it will be interesting to see how far this goes and what kind of potentially positive effect it has on MSPs.
Rich, it feels like a different Microsoft to me. I mean, that collaboration, that partnership with these vendors for good for the MSPs in a way that I don't recall seeing in the past. Not that I track every bit of news like you do, Rich, but it feels like a completely different sentiment within Microsoft, a different position, different vision, collaborating here. And I'm obviously MSPs need the multi-tenancy, so Microsoft either had to build it, buy it, or partner to deliver it. Sounds like they've done the very latter.
Yep, absolutely. There's a one final sort of moral of the story. So, obviously, most of the folks in our audience are MSPs. Most of our clients, all of our clients at Channel Mastered, are vendors. And there's a lesson to be learned, because as I say, Microsoft is going to be going out and essentially, or at least to some degree, selling on behalf of Enforcer and Nerdio. There are a lot of vendors who would like to have that kind of most favored nation sort of status. And I think it's important to point out, this isn't something that happened overnight. And I remember this from when I worked at Microsoft a long time ago. You have to sort of invest and make sure that Microsoft knows and can see and can feel that you're invested. And if that happens over time, and if you're really adding value for them, they start coming back to you more and more and more. And then when an opportunity like this comes along, you're the name that comes up, basically. And so if you are somebody out there who is interested in doing more business with Microsoft, I think a big lesson here is just be a giver instead of a taker, and do that for as long as you can. And quite often that really will pay off for people in the long run.
Well, the good news is it's win-win-win all around. It's a win for Microsoft, it's a win for their partners, a win for the vendors that are participating in the program, and it's a win for the end customers that the MSPs are serving, right?
Totally agreed. So I mentioned Channel Mastered and working with vendors. We happen to be working with a vendor right now, in fact, on many things, including their onboarding process. And I'm guessing that's why your tip of the week, Eric, takes us to onboarding.
Ripped from the headlines, right? As many of these tips of the weeks go sometimes, yeah. So, Rich, obviously, many MSPs are experiencing platform sprawl, vendor sprawl, tool sprawl, whatever you want to call it, inconsistent procedures, miscommunications internally and with their clients. But in no area is this most risky than during onboarding new clients. So if we get that wrong during that initial onboarding phase, then that customer satisfaction drops dramatically. There can be some buyer's remorse or regret on the part of the customer. Of course, the MSP is scrambling to try to regain the trust that they built all the way through the marketing and sales phases of the relationship. I mean, if we do a great job in getting a client to say yes, Rich, to our services, they're on a high. We've set an expectation that now the service team must not only meet, but exceed and just delight the client, so that allows for more additional services and pull-through sales opportunities down the road. But when the client is at this high and they've agreed and they're excited, and then the service team faces challenges during onboarding, not a good day for anybody. So 3 quick tips on what to think about to try to get your onboarding house in order. Tip number 1, playbooks. An onboarding playbook, it should be required at every MSP. And standardized. We want to standardize on what we're delivering. We want to standardize to the playbook, so that if a client has something weird or outside of that playbook, during discovery, Rich, we can call that out and identify that as either an exception or something that we need to think about maybe addressing separately for them, or ripping and replacing whatever that thing is and dropping in our standard solution. We want I used to call it a minimum standard of what the infrastructure needs to look like from a hardware perspective, your hardware of choice, from a licensing or version perspective for operating systems and any other applications that we're managing, and then simply from what's the minimum requirement of the services that we are delivering to that client in order for them to be our client. As you know, Rich, I like the good, better, best approach to sales. And the good approach, I always say, needs to be the good bundle of services has to be the minimum that every new client has to subscribe to, including your managed services along with cybersecurity, in order to be your client and remain your client. So that playbook has to be built from that perspective, and we need to execute against what the playbook says. Number 2, centralize all communications and documentation in your PSA and documentation platform. We should have everything documented correctly, and a process for how we document these things, and a naming convention for things. Like, our organization needs to follow a naming convention for everything that we're doing, so every technician and engineer and the sales team knows exactly what that is, and the VCIOs and CTOs and CISOs, so that we have a common communication and language that we understand and we can communicate consistently with our clients, and allows us to track performance accurately. So all of that centralized in the documentation platform and our PSA. And then holding regular internal huddles with our team, after action reviews on how onboarding went, and having those meetings with our clients, gauging their satisfaction. If something happens during onboarding that is an exception, we need to implement change management promptly and quickly. In fact, Rich, onboarding a new client is a project. So we have to have a kickoff meeting with that client to explain to them what happens. And typically it's 3 phases, right? It's discovery, it's provisioning, it's training, and then it's go live. So we're going to walk the client through each of those phases and say, here's what happens during each of these phases. Here's what we expect. When we find something that forces us to do something different or outside the scope of that, here's how we're going to manage change. And we're going to communicate that with the client and get the client to understand that they are a necessary participant in onboarding. This is one thing, Rich, that I've found, many MSPs aren't really reflecting to their clients. Like, Rich, you're my new client. You have a very important and deliberate role, you and your team, during onboarding. We're doing this as a team together. So this way, it's not a lot of finger pointing. We're working together for the positive outcome of onboarding that client, getting them prepared to receive managed services for all the benefits and security that they expect. So we're doing that together. So we're going to have that huddle, and then we're going to have phase reviews, like a project with the client, while we're doing internal huddles with the team, and then we're establishing when go live date hits. Only after provisioning and training their team, the client's team, your team, and our internal team on the SLAs, on what's the priority 1, priority 2, priority 3 issue, how we escalate and all that, can we then say our go live date is October 1st, let's say. During that time, Rich, we're delivering service on a best effort basis because they're not completely onboarded yet, but they need service. So a couple of quick tips there. Hopefully that helps some of our audience members really kind of relook at how they're onboarding their clients to make sure that we don't churn them out early.
A lot of wisdom there. A few things that kind of came immediately to mind for me. And one, you were talking about playbooks, and I remember, our mutual friend Carl Palachuk and his brother Manny. They're very much in agreement with you about the importance of that, and they love the idea of checklists.
Yep.
Where you're making sure that you're doing the same things and everything gets done in the same order for each client.
Consistently.
Yeah.
Have a consistent experience throughout that process. Yep.
And the other thing, you were talking about keeping communications centralized, and I was just kind of thinking to myself as you were talking about that. So, I mean, you are onboarding a client. The client is new to you. You are new to them. And anytime anyone is new to anything, they're a little bit uncomfortable. They're easily confused. And something as simple as some inconsistency in terminology, as you were saying, can accentuate that confusion. Confusion is not a good feeling. You don't want people coming out of the onboarding process even a little bit uneasy. And so something just as simple as let's keep all the communications in one place. Let's make sure we know what's been told, and let's make sure everything we told them in the same way. It sounds like a nitpicky thing, but it can be a really big issue in terms of customer experience.
And, I'll share one thing, Rich. One of the ways when we had our MSP practice that we won business against an incumbent is we actually promoted our onboarding process during the sales phase of the conversation. We had a 115-point checklist. It's probably one of my, most downloaded assets, on the MSP Master platform. It's a 115-point checklist on onboarding a client. Nowadays, we don't use paper checklists and spreadsheets. We have documentation platforms and PSAs and things like that. But we would show the client exactly how we phase it out, why it's important. And they were like, wow, my existing IT provider had nothing like this. Or what would happen if a client is interviewing a few MSPs, competitors of ours, guess what the first question they would ask the next person to come in to pitch them on their services was? Tell me about your onboarding process. We made sure to really hammer home how important and critical that was, and why we did it, and why and how good we are at it. And that closed more business than anything else, in some cases that we would do. Not of course the value that we bring, but that onboarding is a definite lever. So, think about that, MSPs. It's like use that as one of your unique differentiators going after new business.
Interesting. Well, folks, it is time to do a little time travel here. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back on the other side, we're actually going to go back in time to an interview I did with Michael George from Syncro at the MSP Summit. And then after that interview segment, we'll come back in time to the present day where Eric and I are at the TD Synex conference. But first, very interesting, timely conversation with Michael George from Syncro coming up in a moment. Stick around. We'll be right back. And welcome back to part 2 of this episode of the MSP Chat Podcast, our Spotlight interview segment, where we are very pleased to be joined in person here at the MSP Summit by both Michael George and Zepf. They are the CEO and Chief Product Officer of Syncro. Thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
Rich, thanks for having us.
You've been on the show before, Michael. This is the first time for you, Dee. I'm guessing a lot of folks in our audience are familiar with Syncro, but for those who aren't and who aren't familiar with you, Michael, I'll start with you. Tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. In 2011, I was the founder of Continuum and had a fantastic 8-year journey there. And part of that journey started with Dee actually joining us. So she was our Chief Product Officer. I'll let her introduce herself to you in a moment. But so you can imagine when I joined Syncro, Dee was the first person to join me on this journey, and that started about 18 months ago.
Great. Yeah. Hi. My name's Zepf. I'm Chief Product Officer at Syncro. And I think you also wanted us to tell a little bit about Syncro as a company for folks that aren't familiar. And so Syncro is an all-in-one platform. We have a PSA, an RMM, and also Microsoft 365 management, all built into one simple platform for MSPs. And here at the show, we also announced that we are now offering a Microsoft backup product for Microsoft 365.
Yeah, well, we are recording this on September 16th. This is officially launch day for that product. I definitely want to speak about that with you folks, but as context and background for that, you have a sense, a vision, Michael, for where managed services is going and the increasingly dominant. I mean, it's already the dominant name in the SMB channel, certainly Microsoft. But you have a feeling that Microsoft is really going to be a dominant presence in a lot of different fields within managed services. So talk a little bit about what you see coming and the thinking and logic behind that.
Yeah. And, you use the term vision, and if you don't mind me just pulling on that thread for a moment, in 2017, when Dee and I were at Continuum together, we had a vision for the industry around cybersecurity, and we were out touting that at a time when people said that's not a small business market problem. And lo and behold, today it is a security-led industry. And a vision is something that you have great conviction in, and it's going to happen, but you see it before it becomes obvious to the rest of the market. And that is the same place we're at today in the Microsoft world. Microsoft has 98% of the operating system in the SMB. So they are already a very present part of the world that MSPs live in every day. But they've stood on the sidelines for all these years watching the industry evolve. And it has evolved to a place where today there is between 14 and $16 billion of third-party vendors that are working in and around that Microsoft environment to solve issues, RMM, PSA, cybersecurity, and everything else. But at the root of Microsoft, because they come from the large enterprise space, they have all of those tools. They are, in many ways, the ITSM. They have Defender and Sentinel. Those are the largest cybersecurity company on the planet. They built out Intune and even Lighthouse and have slowly been closing in on this business. And they've gotten to a place now where it's important to really become that ITSM platform for the managed services space. And it's important for a number of reasons. Again, it's become a big enough category now for them to care about it, number one. Number two is without it, they're missing, in the SMB, they're missing in the North American economy, $33 trillion economy, 44.3% of that economy is in the SMB. 98% of the $17 trillion pan-European market is in the SMB. So Microsoft wants to deliver now agentic solutions. They've been declarative. They're betting the company on AI, and they need the managed service provider to be that delivery partner. They are a channel company, and the MSP is going to be the channel of these solutions for Microsoft to this market. So that's why they're closing in now and are going to be providing the ITSM in it.
So talk a little bit about what a typical MSP out there right now who is supporting a lot of Windows devices and a lot of Microsoft 365 customers. What is it that they're not doing, not taking advantage of that they should be?
Sure, actually.
Sure, absolutely. So one of the things we've seen is, Microsoft over the past few years has really done a lot of work around making licensing really accessible to the MSP and to the small business, right? Business Premium, now the security add-on. And what we're seeing is a lot of MSPs are still going out and getting point solutions for things that Microsoft has included in these licenses. They're already paying for in many cases, and they're just not utilizing. And part of the reason is because Microsoft doesn't always make it easy to manage these things, multi-tenant, kind of across all your clients. And so we're trying to really help MSPs take advantage of those licenses and that, that they're already paying for in many cases to really just fortify and secure their environment and use, best in class from Microsoft.
And so from the MSP's perspective, if they begin taking advantage of these things that they've been paying for anyway, I mean, so the implications for them are greater profitability, et cetera. I mean, what's the business impact, basically?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it gives them an opportunity to simplify their stack. And if you look at a $1 or $2 million MSP, they have 10 or 12, sometimes 14 different tools they're using from all these third-party providers. And to Dee's point, most of which aren't needed if you do work inside of the core Microsoft application set that they make available to the market. Again, it's just, they're not built for the SMB. They're built for the enterprise. So that's why they've been so inaccessible. So we are basically refactoring things and making it, easier to acquire, to activate, and to engage. And this stack simplification is a huge factor in profitability, and it's, without profitability, you're not going to have growth.
So 4-ish months ago, if I'm correct, you introduced Syncro XMM, which you've built around this idea, this vision of where managed services is going and Microsoft's role in that. So for folks who are not familiar with it, tell them a little bit about what Syncro XMM is and how it plays into this idea that you can simplify your stack and you can build around these Microsoft technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched Syncro XMM, and it's really taking kind of all of the capability that you would typically find in your PSA, in your RMM, and layering in Microsoft 365 management all under one umbrella. And what we've seen working with our partners is that they are able to now kind of piece together things that used to be managed separately. They've been able to remove a lot of the point solutions from their stack. And so they're, and then they're freeing up their time and starting to look at more proactive security offerings in and around the Microsoft stack. So for example, offering security assessments on the Microsoft tenants, looking at Secure Score and offering services around those. And so part of consolidating the stack and freeing up technician time and freeing up just brain space for the business is allowing them to now lean in and offer higher value services as well.
Now, we're talking about greater profitability by taking advantage of licenses that you're already paying for and so on. But historically speaking, a lot of MSPs, they think the deeper I go with Microsoft, the less margin. I mean, that the Microsoft software itself is not where the margin is. So what is your sort of recommendation to the MSP around how to simplify the stack, manage it around Syncro XMM, and actually add value, do the things that are going to be high margin, high profit, high growth, presumably around AI?
Yeah, so I mean, I think what we've seen is our MSPs doing a few things, right? So one is adding these security services, in and around the Microsoft stack so they're able to not only assess the environment, have project work that comes out of that assessment to make sure they're getting their clients to where they need to be, but also running a lot of AI readiness projects, right? A lot of these end clients aren't even quite ready to fully deploy AI solutions. They have a lot of work to do up front to make sure they have data readiness and that they have their environment set up to do that. So using XMM to manage the whole environment is giving them the time to now offer these additional services and make more, differentiate themselves, offer more business value, and make more money.
So, like I said before, we're recording this on the official debut day of the new cloud backup solution. So maybe start with the need, the use case that you folks identified, and then the solution you built to address it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so we've been, as you've seen, leaning in to Microsoft and really helping our partners to manage the environment. And what we heard loud and clear were two things. One, in thinking about Microsoft 365 and specifically Entra ID, that protection of the identity layer, both configuration, management, which we already have, and monitoring, but also being able to back it up was critically important to them. And so to have that built into the same platform where they're already doing this other work allows them to essentially set it, forget it. It's automatically a new user gets added, they get backed up, you can bill for them automatically. And so it's no overhead to their business, but it provides that critical line of defense for security. And so that's what we heard loud and clear. And so we went and we built, a fully integrated backup solution.
What, from your standpoint, from a Syncro standpoint, is differentiating about it from other cloud backup solutions out there?
Yeah, I think there are three things that I think about when I think about why the cloud backup solution is differentiated and why it's really valuable. So one is it's really comprehensive, right? So we have a full Entra ID backup, all of the objects in Entra, full Microsoft 365 data, including things like Planner and other things that other products don't cover. So it's very comprehensive. It's integrated, so it's really easy to set up, to build, to do all of those things. So there's no overhead. It's really simple onboarding, and it just works. And then third is we're offering a really predictable monthly user price that is unlimited storage. So it's predictable pricing, so you can make money off of it.
And it's unlimited based on a fair use.
A fair use policy, yes. Yeah.
Without necessarily naming names, but I am curious if there ought to be, for a wise MSP, less need for point solutions going forward. What does the future? But we're feet away from an expo hall full of point solution makers. What does the future look like for some of those companies?
Well, not so bright, candidly. And but just look at most any other industry and how it evolves. And there's just so many examples, but I'll just you look at things like Salesforce. Salesforce.com was built for the large enterprise, right? They were, and that was a very inaccessible system, a CRM for the small to medium business market. But slowly and surely they refactored it and everything else. They made some acquisitions and they brought that product now down to even the smallest of businesses. But of equal importance is, there was an ecosystem around them of third-party tools, and they, I'll pick any of them. E-commerce, for instance, you had all kinds of companies, Big Commerce and Demandware and all these other companies sort of filling a room up like that on the Salesforce.com dance floor. And they turned around and went and bought Demandware and got in the e-commerce business and emptied the room. And I think that people are going to get aligned around a certain set of, features and functions in and around the Microsoft world, and they will Sherlock third parties out. And if for those who are not familiar with it, look up that term. These are companies that do this very predictably. They basically start making features and functions available that third parties are providing, so that it now becomes a very difficult place for third party products to exist in. So that's why we've made a very conscious decision to be part of really the contraction and the consolidation that is going to occur in this market. So
I'm new to the Sherlocking term, but I will look this up after the conversation. But are you seeing any Sherlocking happen now, perhaps around the Defender family, for example?
I don't know about specifically in the Defender world per se, but just in general, like look at what they've done with Intune. Lighthouse. I mean, these all are starting to look and feel a whole lot like the ITSM for the managed service provider. And so, in fact, and look, it doesn't mean they're going to empty the entire room out. There's a lot of room for a lot of companies to do things in this space. They are not going to be great at things like enablement and training and teaching people how to sell and market and do all those things in this business. So I think there's a huge community opportunity in and around the space, but there's just a lot of tools and technology that, if you just think logically around the roadmap that these products are on today, I think it would be difficult to be on that road when they start coming down it. So,
well, without connecting this question to anything that you just said there, I do want to ask you about the alliance with ThreatDown that you
Sure.
folks just announced a few
Yeah.
days back.
Yeah.
So tell folks a little bit about what that is to start.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and so I think there'll always be, we're talking about leaning in and working with the Microsoft stack. And as Michael said, we do see that there's going to be a bunch of consolidation. With that being said, there's always room for an innovative point solution, right? They're always going to push the market forward and be at that cutting edge. And so looking at a company like ThreatDown that has really strong, security offerings. And so for us, bringing them into the Syncro marketplace, making it so it's really easy to provision them and also to bill your clients for them. We want to offer our partners choice. We're not going to force anyone to go down any path. And so we're pretty excited about the partnership with them. We think they have a really nice product. And so we're excited to see where it goes.
Now, I know, or at least I think I know, they're not the only vendor, only security vendor in the marketplace.
That's right.
How sort of selective, expansive are you being? There seems to be a whole spectrum there where, maybe on the ConnectWise side of things, they have hundreds, I think, of integration partners. Enable, from what I can pick out, as being a little choosier in terms of who they go deep with. How do you guys think about the volume of partners and how deep will you integrate with them?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is, there's a little bit of bandwidth and those things, as well as being selective around who we get close to and who we work with. We have an open API, so we welcome, integrations of all shapes and sizes in our ecosystem. But in terms of folks that we do a deeper integration with or that we offer as part of our marketplace, we will walk before we run. We're not looking to get every vendor in the space, but we're also, so we're being selective. We're working with companies that we see have good opportunities, that we're hearing, most importantly, things that we're hearing from our partners. We want to bring them what they ask for. And so if we're hearing a lot of asks for a certain vendor, then we'll spin up conversations with them and look to bring them in.
From a security standpoint, generally, is that potentially a build, buy, or partner kind of scenario for you guys, or do you see yourself doing more partnering?
I mean, right now we have several, in terms of like EDR, MDR, we have several partnerships. We also have an integration with Microsoft Defender. And so we have a bunch of choice for folks in our system today.
Michael, the last time you were on the show, I think was about 6 months ago, maybe just a touch more than that, which is half a year in people years and 2 years in AI years. And AI is what we talked about in that last interview. So I'm just curious, as somebody, both of you both pay very close attention to AI. Have you seen things in the last 6 months that feel significant, new, that are sort of exciting or on your mind about where AI has progressed so recently?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, it's interesting. As you mentioned, how fast it's moving. I've recently used an AI tool to look up what Moore's law is in AI terms. Moore's law was Geoffrey Moore, one of the founders of Intel, who said every 2 years things will double.
Chip speed.
Chip speed at chip speed, that would be chip speed. And in the AI world, they say it's about 7 months. Everything will double. And we're certainly seeing that in many dimensions. The areas that we are focused on in particular is really kind of two categories. First is there's a there's a whole science around what's called autonomic computing. And, also a worthy topic to, study and look up. We've been working in that field, since we got here, essentially, in automating a lot of the absolutely, rote traditional pattern matched efforts that technicians do in their daily life. And, computers are far more capable of remediating computers than humans are in certain areas. And this is in and around the OS, patch management, et cetera. So, do we really need a human being to determine that a disk is getting, full and slow and we need to run a disk defrag, or can a system do that? Can we tell whether or not somebody is trying to, they miss their password, and if they're doing it at human speed and not looking like an external threat of any sort, and that it's some automated bot doing it, using MFA, can't we just automatically encourage a password reset? I mean, these are all things that you really don't need a human being to do, or a printer offline. I mean, these are all like pretty rote, mundane things that happen in everybody's everyday life that we think is going to get automated through AI technologies. And we're working on those very things. That's at the autonomic computing level. And then the other side of it is the area that, Dee touched on around agentic solutions, and how MSPs are going to have an opportunity to have a new level of engagement with their customer. First is just getting them AI readiness, which very few small businesses are. So there's a lot of work around that aspect of it. But then, particularly for those that get focused in specific vertical markets, there's going to be a new category of agentic solutions for things like healthcare, financial services, the legal profession, and so forth. And we see the MSP having that trusted business advisor relationship with their end customer, just like in a large company. If you look at a 2,000 person law firm today, it's their internal, their CTO, and that's who they're looking for to come up with solutions and how to use AI in their practice. Well, in a 20 person law firm, they're going to be looking to their MSP for that expertise. And so I think this is we call it the golden ticket. This is the new opportunity for an MSP to have a completely different relationship, a truly trusted business partner relationship with with their end customer. That's not just around technology. It's actually around their business. This is about, how can I help you as a 20 person law firm in your field leverage AI technologies to improve your own productivity and efficiency and performance and all of that. So these are the two categories. It's really at the autonomic computing level, and then it's at the agentic, solution level. And we're kind of staying out of the middle ground, if you will. Those are the two categories that we are maniacally focused on.
On the autonomic side, how fully autonomous do you expect RMM functions, managed services management to get, and how comfortable would you advise an MSP eventually get? I still talk to a lot of MSPs who will go only so far in letting the agents or the software just do the job.
Sure.
How far do you see that going? And what would you advise MSPs they should be, preparing for?
Sure. I can tell you some of our targets, because I think you're quite right. I think the concept of a fully autonomous, MSP is a little bit like a fully autonomous car. I happen to have a Tesla, and I use it on certain cases where I take my hands off the wheel, traveling slowly in traffic and so forth. Would I go 75 miles an hour and, start reading the newspaper? The answer is no. And I think same is true in this, in this world. particularly where you have things like security, like the stakes are high in getting these things wrong. So, if you're reducing sort of the performance of people's systems, if you're making them vulnerable from a security perspective, that's not a good place to be or put in the hands of this new generation of autonomic capabilities. So, I will give you again some of the goals that we're driving for, which is by the end of 2026, leveraging our platform, we will have 30% of what today a level 1 or a level 2 technician performs in their daily task for their end customer on the system side. By the end of 27, our goal is to have it at 50%. And those are reasonable levels of achievement for, again, the autonomic computing that we're talking about. But think about taking 30% of the labor out of that end of the equation and being able to apply it in areas where your engagement now is with your customer and you're working on their business problems and all of that, as opposed to, getting printers back online or disk defragging and, all the other things. So those are the benchmarks that we're driving for. And I think that those are reasonable expectations for this market.
To go back to the other part of the AI equation that you were talking about before, where MSPs will be truly delivering business value by creating healthcare industry-specific agentic solutions and so on. For the MSP in the audience who's thinking, I don't develop applications, I don't know how to build agents and so on. I hear companies like Pax8 kind of talking about creating a marketplace of agents, and it's a question of weaving things together. What is your sense for the opportunity for the MSP to create those?
So that's quite right? If you ask a typical MSP, they aren't necessarily software developers and they don't necessarily think in those terms. However, the language being used for development is the English language. I mean, these are tools now. If you look at like Copilot and something, these are tools that you can use essentially common language and use, prompt engineering and everything, things that, but, so that's number one. Like, this is not a scary development place where you're down into, really deep code level, development, number one. But I will tell you that the MSP is really good at solving problems. They like to find out that a customer has an issue. Today in the world of like a cybersecurity breach or whatever, right? These are the things that they love to solve those problems for. And the way to approach this market is we are going to seed our customer base with opportunities to have kernels in these. There's 5 vertical markets that really matter most. We mentioned a couple of them: healthcare, financial services, legal, construction, and nonprofit. And by seeding the market and giving one of our MSPs an opportunity to go sit with small RIA, registered investment advisor, and say, let me show you a few examples of how to use Copilot for a financial for your business. They get to sit there and do that with the customer, and the customer will sit there and say, that's great. Can I use that or have that? But they'll also sit there and they say, boy, if you can make it do that, can you make it do this? And that's where I think MSPs are going to excel, because they are problem solvers. And it's just a new dimension to the problem, using technology to solve business solutions as opposed to using technology to solve technology, issues.
So when you talk about, creating these seeds, essentially, so these are sort of like templated solutions in the markets you identified that you can build a conversation. If the customer wants to use it as is, great. Right. And even if they don't, if that gets them thinking about other things, right, that's kind of the idea.
That's exactly the idea. And I think I think that is going to work really, really well. I think people need to embrace that model. Um, but I think that the MSP market is actually very well suited when they get their mindset around, I'm here as a problem solver. I don't need to know the financial services industry as well as my customer, but they know it and they know what they want and they know what they need. They need to be inspired to see a solution that solves a problem in their category, and they're going to see it and they're going to get very excited, and they're going to say, again, just as I gave you that example, they're going to say, that's terrific. Can you make it do this? Or can you make it do that? And the answer is going to be yes.
Are these seed solutions products, or are they resources you're making available to your partners?
Yeah. They're not finished products. They're really kernels, and they'll serve as usable examples, I think is probably the best way to categorize it.
But will you be selling those to the MSPs or through the MSPs, or is this sort of like a partner resource?
Some of the business model things are yet to be determined, candidly. We're trying to figure that out. And we're figuring it out with our customers, our MSP partners, and we're going to experiment. We're willing to kind of put some of that stuff out there, listen and learn and see how they do, and maybe ride alongside of them and get them up on their feet. And we're going to see what works, and then we'll double down on it then.
Do you expect to have something for MSPs to bring to their customers next year? What's the timeline look like?
Yeah, I think 2026 is, it's going to be a year where, and I don't think we're going to be alone. You mentioned PAX 8, is thinking about this and doing this. But I think 2026 is going to be a year where these agentic solutions are going to start making their way into this market. They certainly will be from us.
So big day for Syncro XMM. What is on the roadmap? What can you speak to publicly that comes next?
We're not going to, we like to under-promise and over-deliver. So I think we will just say that it is most likely going to be more in the security space. And I think if you look at the amount of, Dee and I were joking earlier about, MDR, XDR, all the R's that are out there in the world. I mean, cybersecurity is a big, big problem, but so many of these solutions get you 70 or 80% of the way there. And that way you end up having to go license something else and to fill in that gap. And now you have some overlapping capabilities and all of that. I think you're going to see a level of consolidation, some of it through acquisition, certainly. But I think that is a category today that the stack needs to be simplified and reduced. And so just like everything else, we are in the same way that Microsoft is betting their company on AI. That is, they've made that very clear. We're really betting our company on Microsoft. So anything we do will be in and around security in the Microsoft world is what you'll see from us next.
Big hints. This will keep people busy thinking about what could that be, because it points in certain directions. That's great. Well, Michael D., thank you so much for joining us, taking time out here at the show. For folks in the audience who want to get in touch with you or want to learn more about Syncro XMM or the cloud backup solution, where should they go? Yeah,
well, please, come to our website. It's syncromsp.com. And also, we have so much confidence in the usability of our product. I think to this day, we're still the only company where you can actually sign up and get a download and get a free trial of our product without having to talk to a salesperson. And that is a critical factor because, as we know, because of the overfunding in this industry, there's lots of really pretty hyped up salespeople that are out there ambitiously selling their product. We let our product speak for itself. So come to our website, download a free trial. We'll be there and available to help people. So we're not abandoning them, but we think that people they're in the technology field and they're pretty smart. And if they have an opportunity to try, our product, they'll license it and make a business out of it.
Fantastic. Michael George, Zepf from Syncro, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Yeah, Rich, thank you.
Folks, we're going to take a break here. When we come back on the other side, I will be rejoined by Eric, and he and I will share some final thoughts about this conversation, have a little fun, wrap up the show. Stick around. We will be right back. And welcome back to part 3 of this episode of the MSP Chat podcast. And welcome back to the present day here at the TD SYNNEX Inspire 2025 conference. One last thank you to Michael George and Zepf, the Chief Product Officer at Syncro, for a very interesting conversation. That they are betting that business around the proposition that, even to the degree, you think about the degree to which Microsoft is a huge, huge presence in the world of SMB technology and managed services today. They're betting everything on Microsoft becoming even bigger, and this, becoming an issue not just for MSPs who are going to also have to orient a lot of what they do around the Microsoft cloud, but also for a lot of other vendors like Syncro. Michael invoked this term during the interview that I had not heard before, but have since looked up, which is Sherlocking, which it turns out is this phenomenon in the Apple world, but it's not confined to the Apple world, where they'll see a vendor partner do something interesting, they'll build it into one of their operating systems, and you don't have a market anymore. And Syncro is betting basically that there's going to be a lot of that, particularly in cybersecurity out there, as Microsoft gets even bigger than they are today in security, and they are huge in security. So they have a very pointed, particular point of view over there about how what the future holds for Microsoft and managed services. What do you think? Having heard it directly from Michael and Dee now, what do you think?
Well, there's one thing that I definitely will bet on is that Microsoft will be getting bigger. So you led with that, and I'm like, yes, they are going to get big. And you know what? Take advantage of the opportunity now and look to the future and identify the opportunities to grow with Microsoft. You're a Microsoft partner. They are definitely doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on adding more and more value to the services that they're offering in their existing license SKUs, in Azure and M365 with security. I got to tell you, Rich, a few years ago, Microsoft, there were other vendors that were delivering these services, and then Microsoft began adding those services into these existing SKUs. And I've spent probably the last couple of years helping partners kind of re-look at their solution portfolio, their bundles and things like that, and identifying opportunities where Microsoft licensing could cover some gaps in their client security posture at a very cost-effective rate, maybe just an upgrade of a license or two. And some of these security services now, do a really good job. And, going up to E5 on the M365, that is all the kit and caboodle kit of security from the Microsoft perspective. So, partners that are betting on Microsoft and looking to Microsoft to lead in that area, probably a good bet.
All right. Well, that thought leaves us with time for just one last thing, folks. And dolphins, Eric. Dolphins, they are intelligent creatures. They're so like us in so many different ways. And it turns out one of those ways is that, like many members of the human species, they like to get high. It turns out, this was discovered by makers of a documentary for the BBC, that in the wild they observe this behavior. Dolphins will sometimes seek out pufferfish. They'll grab a hold of them. There's a very particular way that they know to manipulate the pufferfish so that the pufferfish will kind of puff out. And emit this toxin.
Yeah.
That makes the dolphins
high.
high.
Are you kidding?
And they'll do this for fun. And then and apparently, I haven't seen the documentary, but you can tell once they've done this that they're a little stoned. They're having a good time. And so one more example of the many, many parallels between humans and dolphins.
Party on, Garth. You know, in my younger days, I used to scuba dive in the Caribbean with my uncles and things like that. And we would go down and, you know, there were pufferfish all around, and they're spiny fish, right? But when they're deflated, so that when they puff up, what they do is they just suck a bunch of water into themselves. I don't know where it goes. And then these spikes protrude and they have the toxin. So basically it's trying to, you know, it's their defense mechanism against predation. But I remember seeing, like, you know, big pufferfish, mama pufferfish, and a bunch of little baby pufferfish, and they're just swimming, and my uncle would flick the little babies, and they go, and they pop, and it was kind of fun to see. We didn't do it to get high, Rich, as far as I know. Maybe my uncles knew something I didn't know, but, you know, anyway.
It is interesting how a defense mechanism can backfire on you a little bit, because this particular defense mechanism has attracted the interest of dolphins. They want to get closer to you based on this defense mechanism. Well, folks, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the show. That's all the time we have for you. We will be back again in another week's time with another episode for you. Until then, we will just remind you, as we always do, this is both a video and an audio podcast. So if you're listening to us but you'd like to check us out on video, go to YouTube, look us up. You're going to find us there. If you're watching us on YouTube but you're into audio podcasts, go to Google, Apple, Spotify, wherever it is you get your audio podcasts, because you're probably going to find MSP chat there as well. And wherever it is you find us, please subscribe, rate, review. It's going to help other people enjoy the show just like you. This show is produced by the great Russ Johns. It is edited by the great Riley Simpson. They're part of the team with us at Channel Mastered. Channel Mastered is an organization that works with vendors to help them build, grow, optimize, improve their MSP channel. You can learn all about Channel Mastered and all the services we provide on our website, which is www.channelmastered.com. Channel Mastered has a sister organization called MSP Mastered. That's Eric working one-to-one with MSPs to help them grow and optimize their business. You can learn more about that venture at www.mspmastered.com. So again, we thank you for joining us. We'll see you in a week. Until then, folks, please remember, as we so often urge you to, that you can't spell channel without MSP.